Jasmine, thank you so much for joining the Pantrium podcast. I'm really looking forward to bringing you on the show today.
Thank you. Good morning, Christy. Nice to meet you again.
Of course. Yeah, we spoke a couple of weeks ago just to connect on the discussions that we're going to touch up on today, which
Yes.
includes diversity, leadership, and innovation, and much more about your career journey as well.
Yeah.
And as you know, the first question I ask all my guests is to introduce themselves with a fun fact, just to get kind of an understanding of who you are as a person beyond the fancy titles. So, without further ado, Jasmine, what's your fun fact?
I think my fun fact would be I actually had a private pilot's license, which I attained when I was 16. So I pretty much got the license to fly before
Wow.
the license to drive. Uh, and
Why
being
not,
in
I
a
suppose?
Yeah, so that's my fun fact. And I would say, like, looking back in my younger days, working in an office environment in the corporate world is the last thing on my agenda. I actually aspired to be a pilot, but life takes us in different directions. So, yes.
That is really interesting. So, how did you go from aspiring to become a pilot to go into tech and in your organization that you are today with AWS?
I would say I did apply to be a fighter pilot after high school to join the Air Force, but unfortunately, due to a string of reasons and medical issues which they uncovered during the tests, health tests,
Mm-hmm.
I was not eligible to be in the same health level screening criteria that was laid out to be a fighter pilot. So
Okay.
that was pretty much the bar that I did not meet. So I couldn't join the Air Force, unfortunately. And so I went to college, got a degree in psychology, a major in psychology, and then went on to the corporate world. So I actually spent the younger days after college just trying to figure out my footing in the working world because it's like, oh yeah, I had the dream of becoming a pilot for the longest time, but
Yeah.
and I was just getting a degree just for the sake of getting a degree and trying to figure my way out. So had a few career changes, and I think life kind of like set itself up after my master's in Cornell. And that was when I actually found my true calling of going into retail and working in Hawaii, working with a duty-free shop in Hawaii
Mm-hmm.
as a management trainee. And from there, from brick and mortar luxury retail, I got into e-commerce,
Yeah.
joined a startup in Singapore, which was the equivalent of, I guess, Instacart in New York. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like grocery online shopping, same business concept. And then with that, there were rumors that Amazon retail was opening up in Singapore and they're going to use Singapore as the springboard to expand into the APAC region.
Yeah.
And through my network of friends who were already back then in AWS Singapore, because the web services was actually operating for quite some years before retail made its presence, I got connected to people there and applied for the job. And since then, I've transited through from retail to AWS.
Welcome to the Pantrium podcast. Here, there's no fluff and no sales pitches, just real conversations. I'm your host, Christy Christensen, and at Pantrium, we bring together bold, curious founders and leaders to share their stories, their lessons they have learned, and the hard truth behind their success. If you're craving deeper conversations, you're in the right space. So let's dive in. In that journey, and as you're moving from retail into tech and with AWS, what would you say has been some of your biggest challenges through that career path?
From retail to tech, I would say it's the bridging the technical knowledge and understanding of a retail world to the tech world because it's an entirely different set of knowledge needed. But I am thankful that when I transitioned to AWS, we actually had a very comprehensive onboarding program that allows us to spend time to get our learning up through getting the cloud practitioner certification. So that was 2 months spent onboarding, learning through getting the certification and other trainings that were deemed to be useful in our scope of role. And we had onboarding buddies that assigned to us. So that was really good. And I would say along the way, having good team members and good managers that would mentor you and advise you would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about the mentorship, but first, before I do that, you could almost put some synergies in between going from retail to tech, today's world where digital innovation and the transformation and everyone's roles are being influenced with AI. How did you, and what would you advise others to do when you are transitioning and looking to upskill yourself within the space of tech?
So I leverage a lot on the learning courses that are available to us on AWS. I think these are courses that the public can find online as well. So on our KNet, we had like the cloud practitioner certifications. We also had a lot of internal training. So whenever we have new services, and especially over the past few years with the rollout of GenAI services, I would take those courses to learn about those services, the use cases, how it impacts our life, and having conversations with my technical colleagues, right, who have the technical knowledge. And if there's anything I do not know, I would just be very open. That, I would ask them, can you explain to me in as simple way as possible for somebody that's non-technical? What does this mean? What does this service do? So having this learn and be curious attitude would be very, very important. And again, in the age of AI, it's very easy to get access to a huge learning base of courses and knowledge that you can upskill yourself. So I would say that's very helpful. The one thing that I would say AI would not really be able to help is your soft skill, right? And I think this is something which comes with life and experience. And this is something that we would always have to work on and hone and sharpen on our own throughout interactions with people, throughout interactions with our managers, our peers, and then ask for feedback, like how are we doing? How did I do in this meeting? Is there something I can do better? We met when I was presenting like a culture of at the panel, and then I'm a certified culture of innovation speaker. So usually when I'm done with my presentation, I would ask for feedback from the audience. They have a survey. And also with my colleagues who are there with me, I would ask them, like, how did I do? Is there something I could improve on? So, yeah.
And I think this is, it all sounds so easy. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. I need to go out and look for some courses online, and I need to ask for feedback, and I need to be honest when I don't actually understand something, to ask someone to explain it to me in simpler terms. Just being confident and be okay with saying to others, actually, I don't understand this. Can you please explain this to me?
Yeah.
It's probably not for everyone. What's your experience with that?
So actually this, I would say I had a interesting experience. And actually, it was a hard fall for me that made me learn that I have to voice out more and ask for help and escalate. Because I think growing up, especially like in the Asian context, we always try to be perfectionists, and also we tend to be, I would say, more soft-spoken, and we tend to take on a lot more and think that we can do everything ourselves. It could also be my family's way of upbringing, right? And what happened was a few years ago in my retail days, I was actually in charge of launching the pets category for Amazon retail in Singapore. So it's an entirely new category. I spent almost an entire year planning, execution up to the day of the launch. The launch went well. We exceeded the targets, etc. But then, in the eyes of management, it was a complete fail despite hitting revenue targets, because it was launched during the year of COVID, with supply chain breakdown throughout the world. So a lot of the key products and brands were listed on the website, but there was not available in terms of stock. And that was a huge miss, which I received like very, very harsh feedback on. And in the end, the feedback was like, this is something that you should have escalated and asked for help, or maybe even like 2 months before. If you think that it's not going to make it, then we could have potentially delayed the launch. So back then I was like, oh yeah, actually it's true. Like there's nothing wrong with admitting that, something's not going to work and delaying the launch. Uh, or even asking management to help to see like, is there something they can do to try to bring in the stock from somewhere else, etc. So that was the conversation I had with my manager. And it made me realize that, yeah, why do I need to just commit to a launch deadline and force myself way through it to make it happen? Sure, again, revenue targets were good, etc. But on the side, it doesn't look very good because, like I said, out of stock is not really a good customer experience. So in that sense, in the eyes of what we always like to preach in terms of earning the customer trust, an out of stock situation is actually, I would say, a break of customer trust. So that's why I got such a very harsh feedback that yes, you made the launch, but I don't think you did a good job. And that pretty much made me feel that, the next time I should just learn to escalate and just push back and not just commit to doing everything and agreeing to everything.
Yeah. And can you see that have influenced the way that you work today as well?
Yes, for sure. I mean, now I would say I will be very open if I have a roadblock that I think needs a higher level of escalation to help my customers get through it. I would raise it up super early to my managers, and we will work through the problems together. And I think that has been the most helpful way of learning from that experience and moving forward. And it's the same with everything else, like in terms of my own personal development, learning of knowledge. And that's why I would say I took away the whole, like, I can do everything myself. Like if there's nothing that I do not know, let's just ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because also escalating it early, being curious and being perhaps more transparent with how things are moving ahead.
Yeah.
Have you seen that also opens up for new dialogues and new opportunities that you might not have had if you had not been been as transparent and open and honest?
Yes, for sure. Because I think when you escalate a problem and you have that open dialogue, you're opening yourself up to inputs from other people that may come with a different perspective, and they may offer an alternative solution that you may have missed and overlooked. And that helps, again, it's a learning because that's a very good idea. I could take this on and adopt this approach. And then it becomes something that I learned, which then eventually I would be able to share that new knowledge that I acquired to other people as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, I think it's also understanding the benefits of also showing, being transparent, right? Why I hesitated there for a second is because I was about to say the word weakness, but I wouldn't actually call it a weakness. I would call it a strength to lean in, to ask for advice and also search for support than thinking that you are the almighty and you can do it all by yourself, because at the end of the day, multiple brains are better than one.
Yeah, that's true. But I think weakness would not be the wrong word to use in the context that what I was used to, right? Because you're brought up to say that you're expected to know everything. You're expected to be good at everything. So coming from the background that I had, not having a perfect score or not knowing everything or not being able to do everything yourself makes you feel like, oh, there must be something wrong with me. There must be some form of weakness. Like, am I like not so smart? Or, creates self-doubt. But then I would say, again, that kind of experience made you realize that there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And there is nothing wrong with embracing failure, which is what Amazon, AWS is really huge on. And if the more you embrace failure and see everything as a form of learning, I would say then that's how we improve and that's how we become better and better, because failure is just a mirror that life shows you that this is something that you have not learned yet. And then once you learn, then you move on.
Yeah. I really like that. And also, test and learn and just keep on going and
Yeah.
enhance those small nuggets and then tweak them constantly.
Yeah.
And I wanted to hear when you're also saying about like there's that's a very built-in focus within AWS about failure and understanding and learning and pivot from there. Can you share some practical examples of how you do that?
Yeah. I have a very interesting story to share as well. This is also from my retail days. I think it was probably my first or second year. So back then I was managing the perishables and consumables business. So chilled, fresh, frozen, anything that's chilled, fresh, frozen would come under my purview. And I literally broke the warehouse.
You broke the warehouse.
Yes, I broke the warehouse
What does
operations.
that mean?
So basically, shipments were not exactly going out to the customers because of a single error on the Excel sheet. So with the chilled, fresh, frozen, I had to upload the temperature ratings of the chilled, fresh, frozen on a line item level so that it gets uploaded into the system so that when your vegetables, your meat, your fruits, your fish arrives, the people receiving the stock would know where to put them. Do they go into the freezer? Do they go into the walk-in chiller? Do they go to the reach-in chillers, etc.? But what happened was that a girl that was interning for me, she was working on the Excel sheet, and it was a very simple mistake that she kind of like double-clicked and changed the inputs while the lines were hidden. So inevitably, she changed the temperature ratings of those hidden cells without knowing that that was the root cause. And that pretty much changed the temperature rating of a lot of line items. And so, for example, the warehouse people, they're used to it. So they'll be like, why is fish being directed to a reach-in chiller? Why is the cabbage being directed to the freezer? Everything was haywire. And because everything is automated once you upload it, the systems were not making sense. They couldn't inbound my product. And as a result, nothing gets stored and nothing gets shipped out, even if a customer places an order. So it was a huge, complete mess. And we spent a few hours trying to figure out, re-upload, without realizing that it was the Excel that happened.
Yeah.
So eventually I manually changed everything. I did it. And then after that, I reviewed the upload sheet. And that was when I realized, oh, that was the mistake. Like she kind of double clicked while everything, there were lines hidden. So basically I say I, because technically she reports to me. So I take responsible for everything. So the result of that was, it's because breaking down a warehouse operation is huge. You are compromising thousands and thousands of customer orders for that day. So we had to write what we call a correction of error, which basically allowed me to review 5 questions. It's a standardized template that we answer, like, how did this happen? Why it happened? What exactly happened? What did we do to solve the problem? What are we doing to prevent the problem from happening again? And that is a very good exercise because it allows us to review the entire process end to end. And then after that document was shared with leadership and the impacted teams from that day. And then we get the alignment on, like, whether my proposal for of prevention of future similar incidences would be applicable, etc. We get a sign off. So then that document becomes an actual live learning document that you learn from your mistake.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's a really good framework, I would say. I wanted to loop back on that you mentioned earlier with AI coming in and digitalization being such a big part of our everyday life now. Soft skills are becoming even more important. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Soft skills is important because at the end, we still have a world of human-to-human interaction. Especially in my current role now, I would also need to work with internal stakeholders. And these interaction is still human-to-human, which means you need the soft skills in communication, You need the soft skills to earn the trust of your customers, to earn the trust of your co-workers, so that you would be able to help each other and achieve the goals of your customers. On a company as big as and as I would say worldwide as AWS, Amazon, we do have standard playbooks and rules, right? And these are the things that, let's say, for example, if we have a chatbot in the company and you ask what should be the correct way to handle this problem, there may have been rules set up already. And if you ask ChatGPT or somebody that's using a chatbot, they might just give you that standard answer, and then that kind of limits the flexibility and creativity that you offer as a human being to your customer. But then we would then be able, as a person, challenge those rules and say that, this might not be the best thing for the customer. It's always this question of like doing the right thing and doing things right? If you ask an AI, it would be yes, doing things right. But then is that the right thing for the customer? And I think this is where us as a human being, as an account manager, as a leader, have to step into to make and answer that question. Is it time to do the right thing, or do we do things right?
I think that's really interesting. And I'm curious, what has been some of the biggest aha moments for you?
Let's see. In terms of using my decision as the right, to do the right thing for the customer, actually, this was for, I would say, the very, very first one, which I loved. This example was when I was working in Hawaii. I was managing the luxury department, and we had an American tourist from the mainland, and Hawaii is pretty much tax-free shopping when it comes to shopping at duty-free shop. So most tourists, they would shop at the gallery in Waikiki and get their tax-free shopping and then transit out internationally. So domestic travelers, unfortunately, are not able to get that because it's considered domestic purchase. So this American tourist came in, loved the watch, wanted to get it from the Galleria, but we are unable to sell it to him because he's flying back to California. So out of customer obsession, I actually walked with him out of the Galleria across the street in Waikiki to a competitor shop that has the watch, and just let him there and say that, you know what, you can't buy it here, but you could just buy it in this watch shop at 5% sales tax rate. So that's the price difference, but at least you get your watch. And I would say in that way, that felt really good. It was actually, I would say, featured as a win wire in the company, even though we did not get the sale, but it was a demonstration of customer obsession, putting the customer's needs first, because we believed in the long-term value of the customer. So maybe we might not get the sale now, but he would have had a good memory and experience with the store, which eventually translates to potentially him coming back in the future when he has an international travel in the next time. And I think this is the reason why I also enjoy working in Amazon, AWS, because we have the same level of customer obsession. And I think this is also, I would say, what impacts my day-to-day work. We always ask that, what is the best thing for the customer? And we always try to do the right thing for the customer. And that's, I would say, the breaking point in making the decision.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting also because a lot of people talk about being, we need to put the customer first and we are customer obsessed and so on, right? But at AWS, how you really bring the customer in the forefront, and it becomes more than just words and principles.
So this one is very easy. We all have sales revenue and targets to meet. But at the end, what's best for the customer would be the one that earns the long-term trust. So actually, in the span of the last 18 months, myself and my teammates have actually worked to reduce the customers billing with us by 40%. So
you have reduced them,
their spend, their expenses with us. Yes. And I mean, any other companies would be like, why? Like, how is that good for us? Then your sales revenue. And it's true, I did not hit my target, but I know it's fine that I did not hit my target. But at the end, my customer actually trusts me more. And that ensures it ensures the long-term value of this customer because they are even more committed to stay with us and grow with us at the end of the day. So, I mean, most companies, if you speak to them and say, what? I think their managers will be like, why? What are you doing? It's so bad for our revenue. It's bad for yourself. It's bad for the company targets, etc. But that's what we do in AWS, that we are really customer obsessed and we do not mind taking the short-term hit for the long-term growth of the customer.
And I might be speaking to all the ladies out there, and perhaps this doesn't happen quite as often for men, but the analogy that came into my head there when you said this is like when you go into a fashion store and you're trying on different things and you have the salesperson flattering you and you're like, this is not suiting my body shape whatsoever. This is a horrible purchase for me. Kind of the same thing, that they're not just stuffing things down your throat, but you're being honest with them and saying, you don't actually necessarily need this, or it's actually not meeting your requirements, or you could do better.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best analogy. I think it's exactly what we do. We know we are not like those sales lady that say everything looks good on you. We are honest. Like if you don't need it, you don't need it.
I think it's refreshing, right? Because nobody has time for, superficial bullshit. Excuse me, my language.
Yes. Yeah.
I wanted to keep us moving ahead. And one thing I wanted to talk to you about, culture of innovation. Can you share a little bit more about your perspective on that?
I would say one of the quotes that I always present in my presentation when I present about culture of innovation is that we always think about innovation as like big revolutionary ideas, but what we tend to overlook is that what seems to be small and insignificant changes, when compounded across millions of customers, could have great effect as well. And I think this is something that we really embrace within the company. We always encourage people to think big and try to improvise and improve their way of working to make things efficient. And when that is compounded through the hours that you put into work, it can accumulate to a lot of time savings. My personal, again, it's a retail example. It was really interesting was that we, in Singapore, we had beer, wine, spirits category. And back then it was Prime Now. So with Prime Now, I think that was, I would say 2-hour delivery in Singapore. And we noticed that the orders for beer, wine, spirits actually spike up from Friday afternoon through the weekend. It means that people were stocking up for their weekend parties and barbecues, etc. And what we wanted to do was to enhance the customer experience. And why would you order a beer for 2-hour delivery and have it delivered at 30 degrees Singapore temperature? So we wanted to deliver chilled beers to the customer. And what we did was that we negotiated with the vendors to loan us the reach-in chillers that you see in convenience store, and we repurposed an aisle in the warehouse so that became like a reach-in chiller aisle, and we stored the beers there. And those beers were eventually then delivered chilled to the customers. Because at that point of time, we had ran out of walk-in chiller capacity because everything was factored in when they built the warehouse, and nobody expected that our business would grow so quickly within that short span of time. And as a result of that, we were also able to invent and simplify, and we further expanded that negotiation with our chicken sellers, our vegetable sellers, to load more region chillers. And we put things such as vegetables and beverages into those region chillers, freeing up the walk-in chillers and able us to store more SKUs into the walk-in chillers that are under the temperature control range, meaning the meats and the fish, whereas vegetables can be chilled, but then not all has to be chilled. So then those are not exactly enforced by food safety rules in terms of temperature control, and they go into the region chillers. So we actually grew our chilled capacity in a very small way of negotiation through our customers. It's a win-win because we are able to sell more. They are able to sell more for us. So our vendors won, our end customers won, and Amazon also won in terms of like reaching more customers and achieving better revenue target.
Yeah. And how
Yeah.
do you facilitate such an environment where people are open and think differently and constantly looking at how do we enhance the customer experience? Because I suppose also, again, on in theory, it's easy, right?
Yeah.
But in practice, we are touching upon people's behavior and changing their mindset, perhaps not for everyone, but for many.
Yeah.
How do you actually cultivate that innovation?
So one thing is the culture within Amazon. So we hire by leadership principles. So we strongly believe that we hire builders. So when we, even at the selection process, we hire people that meets the bar when it comes to the leadership principles that represents Amazon. And then of course, when you come in, my manager, she came from Seattle. So she was with the company for like 5, 6 years already. And I could hear her in her day in and day out mentioning the leadership principles that this is not customer obsessed. There is no bias for action in this way of working. We have to dive deep. And then I was like, wow, okay. And then she's like, don't worry. After 1 year, you would start saying this in your day-to-day work as well. And it's true. And now in this interview or podcast with you, I'm also quoting the leadership principles because it has been my bread and butter for the past 8.5 years.
Yeah.
And that's how it is. Like we get hired based on the leadership
You've been
principles.
drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yes, we've been drinking the Kool-Aid. Yeah.
Brilliant. And as we are moving towards the end of our dialogue, we've talked about innovation and culture and leadership from your perspective, Jasmine, as we are in this ever-changing world, both culturally and socially. What would you love to see others do more of?
I would say I think it's good, or at least this is something that I have been embarking the past few years. Try to maybe learn something new, just one a year. I think that would say it keeps us up to date and helps us stay competitive, right? Because I think most people these days, and there are companies that are very open to say that, it is potentially a possibility that uh, some jobs may be replaced by AI in the future. We may need less people and all of that. And how do we move ahead in this competitive world is to just keep learning and upgrading ourselves and learn something new every day so that we can stay relevant. And
Yeah.
I mean, my goal this year is to take another certification in speaking and also to complete my Danish exams. So yeah.
Very good. And
Yes.
now you said it yourself as well, staying up to date and keep being competitive. How do you do that? Because it can also be quite overwhelming.
I read a lot of like news and journals. So I scout through. And I'm like personally, I love Bloomberg. I think it's great journalism. So they give a very good perspective of like what's happening around the world. And if there's something that's interesting, then I would just again make use of the internet to dive deeper on topics that I'm interested in. And I think that really helps. And in terms of the space that I'm in, like technology and AWS, again, going back to what is given to me, where I have free access, the wealth of knowledge available in our internal training, that really, really helps as well. Then, of course, on the soft skill side, just keep practicing, like practicing speeches, practicing presentation, whatever that comes in, just grab the opportunity and present.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you. I think it's so important. Most people who at least sit in a bigger organization will have some sort of learning forum, intranet of some sort, internal courses, or having relationship with courses or universities where you can get discounts, or you will have a union where you can do this through. Or to your point, like many tech organizations out there have free courses online. I know AWS is one of them,
Yeah.
Microsoft another, and so forth and so forth. So there's basically no excuse.
Yes, exactly. And LinkedIn is great as well. Like
Yes.
in this tech space these days, like I have colleagues who are always sharing articles on Gen AI, their discovery, what they are learning, etc. And then you read those and it's like, all right, if there's something I do not understand, I go out and ask them like, what does this mean? Or
Yeah.
again, ask Google, ask ChatGPT, like, and then you get your answers for yourself. It's just about not being a subject matter expert, but being curious. And if there's anything that you do not know, just satisfy that curiosity on your own accord, learning a little bit every day.
Yeah.
Of course, I do not expect myself to be the subject matter expert in Gen AI like my technical colleagues are, but at least I would then be able to know a little bit about it on a high level so that I can then have that conversation with my customers to earn their trust. And then when it goes deeper, that's when I would go back to my colleagues and rely on them to bring in the technical expertise.
Yes. Speaking of leaning on other colleagues and take inspiration from the outside world and so on, I wanted to hear, what rule would you love to see the industry breaking over the next couple of years?
Most of the people in the sales role would do whatever it takes to sell and close the deal,
Yeah.
right? I honestly and genuinely believe that Amazon AWS is really one of the few exceptions. I'm not saying that we are the only one, but probably one of the few exceptions that takes such a customer-centric approach in the way we sell to the customer. And I really hope that more people will actually adopt this mindset, because that's what is good for everybody. And when we work in that manner, actually, I think it's more to the benefit of the long-term good of the customers, and everybody benefits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
As we are wrapping up this conversation, we could continue for hours.
Yeah.
Who has been a leader that have made a lasting impression on you through your career?
I think there's two people. I would say one would be my manager when I was working in Hawaii. That's on the professional level. Because coming from brick and mortar retail, it's not an easy job. You know, you are walking the store, standing on your feet, managing the sales staff, managing very difficult customers. And she taught me a lot on the people skills of things, earning the trust of the people working with you, for you, and earning the trust of the customer. And also a lot of taking pride in your job. Like, again, Hawaii, even though it's American, largely Asian community. So, and we serve a lot of Japanese customers. So we come from a culture where, in general, like working on a retail store means that it's considered somewhat like a blue collar job. But looking at the way the managers in duty-free shop work, they take a lot of pride just being on the shop floor, serving the customers, putting the best foot forward every single day for the good of the customers and for the good of the company. And I would say that's something that I would say I really admire, because it allows them to understand operations from the bottom up and then bring it up to the management to present in a strategic manner. In fact, like Louis Vuitton, LVMH, back in the days when I was in Cornell, I've met a few people, and they also shared that nobody goes up to management in Louis Vuitton until they've served 1 year on the sales floor. So I actually know somebody who was hired as a director of VP of marketing in New York. And she was put on the sales floor in the Louis Vuitton boutique for 1 year before she could actually go up to corporate. But she couldn't last that 1 year on the sales floor. It was too tough for her. So she left. But it was the way they worked, because they wanted you to understand the operations. And when I saw how my managers worked through the harsh hours on the sales floor, it was really, really inspiring, because it was my first experience of like customer obsession. Yeah. And of course, on the other side would be my dad, actually, on a personal level. He taught me a lot about resiliency and grit. He's 75 this year, so he has been through cycles of financial storm. He came from the banking industry, and I think one thing that stuck to my mind was back then, he worked 40 years for Deutsche Bank. And during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, his department was, I would say, axed from 20 to 6. So 6 people had to do the job of 20 people. And after the financial crisis, when the bank realizes that, 6 people can do the job of 20 people, they never rehired. And he weathered through all of that through all the years. And just because, again, like dedication to his job, and also saying that, I can do it, and whether through any storms, through the next few cycles before retirement. And that taught me a lot that, no matter how hard something seems to be, it is possible to overcome it.
Yeah.
And you just have to bite the bullet sometimes.
I love that. That is such a good point to finish this podcast up on. I really, really enjoyed the conversation, Jasmine. And again, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you, Christy.
If this episode gave you something to think about, I'll be really grateful if you could share this with your LinkedIn network. And to make sure you don't miss out on any new episodes, simply follow Pantrium wherever you are listening or watching. And just a note, the opinions and views shared by our guests are entirely their own and don't necessarily represent the businesses they work for. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, bye for now.